Hello, friends. Welcome to the Thinning of the Veil podcast. I'm your host, Tia Smith. This week, in our study of Come Follow Me, some of the sections that have been included are Doctrine and Covenants 129 and 130. On yesterday's episode of the podcast, I covered the Urim and Thummim and how it can be related back to our bodies and temples and how that all works moving forward as we're gathering Israel and the glory that we attain to, and our bodies becoming essentially a Urim and Thummim in and of themselves. What I wanted to focus on today, though, however, was angels are heavily mentioned in these particular sections. And while I've covered angels quite extensively and will continue to do so, I wanted to read this story because it goes to the ministration of angels. So what I wanted to do really quickly is read Doctrine and Covenants sections 4 through 5 as a setup for the story that I'm going to read. It says, an answer to the question, is not the reckoning of God's time, angels' time, prophets' time, and man's time according to the planet on which they reside? Verse 5 says, I answer yes, but there are no angels who minister to this earth, but those who do belong or have belonged to it. Now, that's the setup that I wanted to give before I read the story. It is clearly evident in our doctrines of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that we believe in the ministration of angels. That particular scripture points to the reality that these are not angels that are not aware of us on this earth, for they have previously resided on this earth. They belong to this earth. And most especially as we've studied this doctrine of visitations from the other side, from angelic ministrations, most often it is our family members who come to either rescue us, to give us encouragement, peace. We can also seek for revelation on their behalf. So it kind of goes both ways from the veil. And what I wanted to read was a story that I've already read in way long time ago in the beginning when I started the podcast, but in an effort to parse some of these stories out so that they stand on their own, I thought that this particular story was really poignant in reflecting on the powers that angels can have in our lives and who they are, and that the ministrations can come more effectively, especially as we're gathering Israel. So I'm going to read this particular story. I have permission to read it, and it is a story about a dear sister named Connie Measom, who lived in Indianola. So I'm going to read it straight word for word, what she wrote about her experience. On June 23rd, 2012, a wildfire broke out in rural Sanpete County, Utah. The Wood Hollow Fire, as it was called, will go down in history as one of Utah's most frightening wildfires. Fueled by erratic winds, it spread like napalm, destroying 108 structures, including 52 homes, and claiming the life of one. What follows is a personal account of Connie Measom, a resident of the area. My husband and I were enjoying the weekend camping with some of our children and grandchildren in Bryce National Park when we learned about the Wood Hollow Fire. We knew the fire was approaching our neighborhood and that our home and property, everything we had there, was in grave danger. Our first instinct was to end our camping trip and to get to our house as fast as we could. But as we discussed the idea, we realized that since the area was being evacuated and the roads would be closed, there would be nothing we could do if we left. So we stayed where we were and worried and prayed. We drew comfort from our young grandchildren, who with great faith and love pled earnestly with their Heavenly Father, asking that Grandma and Grandpa's house would not burn down. I prayed along with them in my heart. Our home in Indianola is very special to me, not only because it is a beautiful house in a beautiful setting, but because it was built entirely by my husband, a son-in-law, and a grandson. A great deal of sweat and love went into that house. We called one of our daughters at her home and asked her to drive to Indianola. Firefighters there allowed her to go into our house briefly to gather what she could. In the few minutes she had, she grabbed our computer and armful of pictures and scrapbooks and some of our important medications, wishing she could do more. As she was escorted out by the firefighter, She could see the fire descending over the mountains, heading directly toward our home. Our prayers and worries grew more intense. The next morning, one of our neighbors called us and reported that the fire had passed through the area and that our home was still standing. He said we should expect some damage. With sadness in his voice, he told us that his home had been completely destroyed. They had lost everything. Later that day, 2 of our daughters drove to Indianola, entering through a back road that had not been closed. As they drove toward our house, they saw the total devastation surrounding the area. The ground was black. All the trees and plants were gone. Many beautiful homes and vacation sites had burned to the ground. They approached our home with growing apprehension and worry. When our daughter called us to report what they had seen, she said, "Mom, it's a miracle. I can't see one bit of damage to the home or garage. It looks like somebody put a circle around your yard and said to the fire, 'Don't burn in here.'" Everything outside this circle was devastatingly burned. The fire came within a few feet of our trailers and other equipment, burning the surrounding area but leaving our equipment completely undamaged. My daughter took pictures of our home and the area around it. Just an FYI here, my friends, that picture that she took is the picture on the thumbnail, and I'm also including it as I'm reading the story. So if you're not watching it, know that there's a picture that you can visually see the description of what this dear daughter took a picture of and saw. My daughter took pictures of her home and the area around it. When she showed them to her husband, who was an experienced firefighter, he was impressed with the skills of the firemen who were working in the area of our home. "They did a wonderful job of backburning the property," he said. But we had been told that the firefighters had not been able to get into the area because of the height of the flames and the speed at which the fire was moving. I was awestruck. I knew that this could not have happened by pure chance. And while I was enormously grateful, I also felt intense remorse and guilt because our home and property was spared, and so many of our good neighbors had lost everything. Overwhelmed by these powerful emotions, I retreated into the bedroom of our RV and prayed, "Lord, how did this happen?" I will never forget what happened after I spoke those words. I distinctly heard a voice in my head say, "I will show you." Immediately I was filled with the Spirit so intensely that I thought I would burst. It filled my body from the tips of my toes to the top of my head. It was unlike anything I had ever felt before, and it was unmistakably from a divine source. As I knelt, paralyzed by what I was feeling, I saw what could only be called a vision. I was looking down at my home, watching the fire approach, and I saw a great army of men, perhaps hundreds of them, encircling our home. They appeared to be farmers, dressed in gray-white clothing. I did not recognize any of them. Each man stood with his back to the fire, his arms outstretched to touch the hands of the men next to him. I saw the amazing scene for a very short time, but I received an understanding that all these men were my ancestors, those whose names I had labored for years to find, those who, through my steady efforts, were able to receive their temple ordinances. I understood that this was their gift to me, their way of saying thanks. I no longer felt guilty because I knew that when a gift is given in love, it must be gratefully accepted. The intensity of the Spirit departed, but I remained still, pondering the new awareness I had received. I understood why our house was still standing. I felt such appreciation for the love my ancestors had demonstrated for me. I rejoiced in my knowledge that these male progenitors had accepted the gospel and received the priesthood, something I had wondered about before. I didn't tell anyone about this experience for a few days because it was so sacred and personal that I felt it might lessen it to share it. But then I came to know that just as this experience had enlightened me and strengthened my testimony, it could do the same for others. With my children's encouragement, I have written this account so it will stand as a record and a testimony for my grandchildren and for my posterity to come. President Joseph F. Smith said, "I believe we move and have our being in the presence of heavenly messengers and of heavenly beings. We are not separate from them. We are closely related to our kindred, to our ancestors, who have preceded us into the spirit world. We cannot forget them. We do not cease to love them. We always hold them in our hearts in memory, and thus we are associated and united to them by ties that we cannot break. If this is the case with us in our finite condition, surrounded by our mortal weaknesses, how much more certain it is to believe that those who have been faithful, who have gone beyond, can see us better than we can see them, that they know us better than we know them. We live in their presence. They see us. They are solicitous for our welfare. They love us now more than ever. For now they see the dangers that beset us. Their love for us and their desire for our well-being must be greater than that which we feel for ourselves. I bear solemn testimony of the reality of this event. I hope or pray that throughout the remainder of my life, I remember this experience and seek to obtain inspiration and personal revelation. I know that I will continue to seek out my ancestors and perform their work, their temple work, with their renewed determination and a sure understanding of the reality of the importance of this sacred work. Connie Measom, July 2012. I have so appreciated over the years this story for a lot of different reasons. Their ancestors, our ancestors, are involved in our lives in levels and ways that we cannot understand. And sometimes we are given the gift of eyes to see and ears to hear their influence in our lives. Connie at this particular time was allowed to see a vision of what actually happened in the saving of her property. And while that does not take away from the destruction that happened to others' property, she was given this gift to see and to have this miracle happen for her. Miracles can look different for everyone in their lives, but know most assuredly, my friends, that our ancestors are involved in the very details of our lives. And that when we are given eyes to see from time to time, their hands and thumbprints will be evident in our lives. May we really pray for eyes to see and ears to hear, to have the spirit of discernment, that we can see them more often, that we can see the ministrations more focused in our lives than we ever have before. But the reality does exist that they are involved. And as we do temple work for more and more and more ancestors, the amount of angelic ministrations increases exponentially. And I don't know about you, but I could sure use all the help that I could get living in these latter days, trying to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. So I add my testimony to Connie's, that ancestors are involved, that they love you, that they are solicitous for your welfare, as quoted by President Smith, and that we will have the help we need to get through these great trying times in the latter days. For it is the promise in Doctrine and Covenants, it is the promise from prophets past and present, and will continue to be so. Please join me tomorrow on the Gathering Academy with Colette. She is going to teach us how to use AI to help us in our ancestral research. This was a miracle, one of the miracles that has been restored, maybe not restored, one of the miracles that have been given to us, that we can move this work forward at a greater and grander pace. And then Friday, I will read a talk, an article written by a professor at BYU about our temples and our bodies and how that corresponds. Next week, I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. I've let you know the situation and circumstances that we currently find ourselves in our house. And I may not even put out an episode because we are doing the physical labor, all of it. And I'm not quite sure I can actually do both without sacrificing my health, which is always on the forefront of my mind. So who knows what happened next week? You'll just have to be patient. But this week, thanks for joining me. And then we have a cool guest coming on the week of Thanksgiving. So I'll talk to you soon, my friends. I hope you're having a great week, and I hope you can feel those ancestors that love you deeply around you, even if it's just in glimpses. We'll see ya. Bye.